Hi, Charlie. I'm Warren. I'm Karen here from Singapore.
I'm glad you got that in. Your priorities are right.
Yes, I have a questions on AI and robotics. Here's my questions. As AI and robotics continue to advance, what do you believe will be the positive and the negative impact of this technology on both the stock market and society as a whole? And are there any specific industrials and companies that you believe will be most impacted?
Karen, I thank you for asking Charlie that question.
Well, if you went into BYD's factories in China, you would see robotics going in at an unbelievable rate. So we're going to see a lot more robotics in the world. I am personally skeptical of some of the hype that has gone into artificial intelligence. I think old-fashioned intelligence works pretty well.
There won't be anything in AI that replaces a gene. I'll state that unqualifiedly. It can do amazing things. Bill Gates brought me out the latest, maybe not the latest version, but one he thought maybe I could handle, which has to be careful with me in terms of leading me too fast. And it did these remarkable things. It couldn't tell jokes. Bill told me that ahead of time, and it prepared me, and it just isn't there. But things like checking all the legal opinions, since the beginning of time and everything, and eliminating all the it can do all kinds of things. And when something can do all kinds of things, I get a little bit worried, because I know we won't be able to uninvent it. And we did invent, for very, very good reason, the atom bomb in World War II, and it was enormously important that we did so. But is it good for the next 200 years of the world that the ability to do so has been unleashed? We didn't have any choice, but when you start something, well, Einstein said after the atom bomb, he said, "This has changed everything in the world except how men think." And I would say the same thing not the same thing, I don't mean that, but I mean with AI, it can change everything in the world except how men think and behave. And that's a big step to take. It's a good question, and it's the best answer we can give. Becky?
This question comes from Tom Seymour. He says, the first sentence of a recent Financial Times article read, "Charlie Munger has warned of a brewing storm in the U.S. commercial property market, with American banks full of what he said were bad loans as property prices fall. Please elaborate on what's going on in commercial real estate. How bad will the losses be, and what sectors or geographies look particularly bad?" I'll just add an addendum from another viewer who wrote in and wanted to know if Berkshire would be more active in commercial real estate as a result.
Well, Berkshire's never been very active in commercial real estate. It works better for taxable investors than it does for corporations taxed the way Berkshire is. So I don't anticipate huge effects on Berkshire, but I do think that the hollowing out of the downtowns in the United States and elsewhere in the world is going to be quite significant and quite unpleasant. I think the country will get through it all right, but as they say, it will often involve a different set of owners.
Yeah, and the buildings don't go away, but
the owners do.
Well, but most people like to buy with non-recourse in real estate, and one time I asked Charlie, there was some real estate guy we were talking to, and how do they decide how much a building like this is worth? And the answer is it's whatever they can borrow without signing their name. And if you look at real estate generally, you'll understand what the phenomena that's happening if you remind yourself that that's the attitude of most people that have become big in the real estate business, and it does mean then that the lenders are the ones that get the property, and of course they don't want the property usually, so the real estate operator counts on negotiating with them, and the banks tend to extend and pretend, and there's all kinds of activities that arrive out of commercial real estate development, which occurs on a big scale. But it all has consequences, and I think we are starting to see the consequences of people who could borrow at 2.5% and find out it doesn't work at current rates, and they hand it back to somebody that gave them all the money they needed to build it. Charlie's had more experience in real estate. Charlie got us started in real estate, though. I mean, Charlie.
Yes, it's difficult. I like what we do better.
Well, as Charlie once said to me when I was leaving his house a few months ago, I was visiting him. We talked for a couple of hours, and I said to Charlie as I left, there wasn't anybody else in the house, and I said, except one daughter, and I said, Charlie, I'll just keep doing what we've been doing. And Charlie said, without looking up or pausing a second, he said, that's all you know how to do, Warren. Yeah. He was right, too. Station 3, is it?
Hi, my name is Jala Z. I'm from Santa Clara, California. And my question is to Charlie and Warren. Given the rise of disruptive technologies that can improve productivity significantly, and AI being one of them, how do you envision the future of value investing in this new era? And what adaptations or new principles do you think investors should adopt? And any recommendations for investors to remain successful in this rapid changing landscape? Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to take that one. I think value investors are going to have a harder time now that there's so many of them competing for a diminished bunch of opportunities. So my advice to value investors is to get used to making less.
And Charlie has been telling me the same thing the whole time we've known each other. I mean, we get along wonderfully because
we are making less.
Yeah, well, but that mostly I think is because it's larger.
When we were younger.
No, we never thought we could manage 508 billion.
No,
or whatever. But I would argue that there's going to be plenty of opportunities, and part of the reason there are going to be plenty of opportunities, the tech doesn't make any difference or any of that. I mean, if you look at how the world's changed in the years since 1942 when I started, you'd say, well, how does a kid that doesn't know anything about airplanes, that doesn't know anything about engines and cars, and doesn't know anything about electricity and all that? But that really isn't that's not the world changing doesn't, or new things coming along don't take away the opportunities. What gives you opportunities is other people doing dumb things. And it's that. And I would say that, well, the 58 years we've been running Berkshire, I would say there's been a great increase in the number of people doing dumb things, and they do big dumb things, and the reason they do it to some extent is because they they can get money from other people so much easier than when we started. So you could start 10 or 15 dumb insurance companies in the last 10 years, and you could become rich if you were adroit at it, whether the business succeeded or not, and the underwriters got paid, and the lawyers got paid. And that creates, if that's done on a large scale, which it couldn't be done 58 years ago, you couldn't get the money to do some of the dumb things that we wanted to do, fortunately. So I think that investing has disappeared so much from this huge capitalistic market that anybody can play in, but that the big money is in selling other people ideas. It isn't outperforming. And I think if you don't run too much money, which we do, but if you're running small amounts of money, I think the opportunities will be greater. But then Charlie and I have always differed on this subject. He likes to tell me how gloomy the world is, and I like to tell him we'll find something, and so far we've both been kind of right. Charlie, wouldn't you? Will you budge an inch on that or not?
There is so much money now in the hands of so many smart people, all trying to outsmart one another and outpromote one another, getting more money out of other people. And it's a radically different world from the world we started in. And I suppose it will have its opportunities, but it's also going to have some unpleasant episodes.
But they're trying to outsmart each other in arenas that you don't have to play. I mean, if you look at that government bond market, the Treasury bill market, I mean, you've got this one bill that's out of line with the others. We bought over $3 billion of it the other day, but those are people. The world is overwhelmingly short-term focused, and if you go to an investor relations call, they're all trying to figure out how to fill out a sheet to show the earnings for the year, and the management is interested in feeding them expectations that will slightly be beaten. I mean, that is a world that's made to order for anybody that's trying to think about what you do that should work over 5 or 10 or 20 years. And I just think that I would love to be born today and go out with not too much money and hopefully turn it into a lot of money. And Charlie would too, actually. He would find something to do, I will just guarantee you. And it wouldn't be exactly the same as before, but he would have a big, big, big pile.
I would not like the thrill of losing my big pile into a small pile. Well, I like my big pile just the way it is.
Well, we agree on that, incidentally. Okay.
Yes, we do. You're one of the most extreme lovers of the big pile.
Becky?
This question is for both Warren and Ajit. It comes from Jason Plonner in Livingston, New Jersey. He says, in 2016, you entered into a very unique transaction with AIG where you assumed up to $20 billion of liabilities in exchange for about $10 billion up front. Can you please provide us with an update on this transaction in light of the increase in interest rates? And then in Tokyo just a few weeks ago, you talked about the risks of banks with assets that were susceptible to rising interest rates. Any insight as to how Berkshire liabilities are susceptible to duration would be appreciated.
Is that directed to Ajit or me or what?
Both.
Okay, let me introduce it my one thing, and well, Ajit is the key to this. He's the one that put the deal together. But we got handed $10 billion, we'll say, but we weren't restricted to putting that into bonds. So, what the exact interest rates affect us to some degree, maybe in terms of the terms of the deal we did with AIG or anybody we would do a similar deal with like that. But we don't have to put it in matching bonds or anything of the sort. it goes into a general pool of assets, which we manage, and the assets, the liquid assets now are 130 billion plus, but it goes in. So it is not set aside in some little compartment like people like to think. Now, any other insurance, no other insurance company could do it, but they can't think that way. They aren't even used to thinking that way, but they can't think that way because they don't have our balance sheet. We account for 26% or something like that of the net worth of all property casualty companies in the United States. So far, the payments that we have had to make have run modestly, and Ajit will correct me on this if I'm wrong because he paid a lot of attention to it. The amount we have had to pay has run slightly below the amount we anticipated having to pay in terms of our share of the losses. But it served AIG's purposes. It came to us where we are in a unique position. There's nobody else that was able to write that, just like when we took on the Lloyds. I mean, Lloyds said there was no choice other than Berkshire Hathaway when they essentially resuscitated their market by laying off a lot of liabilities on Berkshire Hathaway. So we won't see those deals very often. If they're for $500 million or something like that, somebody else will go in there and offer more money, and everybody's looking for money in Wall Street. But if they start talking with a deal like the AIG deal, there isn't any other stop. Now, correct me on all my numbers there, Ajit.
No, one way to look at how the deal is performing since we did the deal is at the point in time when we did the deal, we had made certain projections of how much we will pay out each year. And what we do is monitor what the actual payments are since the inception of the deal, and how does that compare with what we expected to pay out. As Warren mentioned, these two numbers are very close to each other. More specifically, the actual payouts are 96% of what we had projected to pay out at this point in time, which is good but not great. We are still ahead of the curve. If we do end up paying out less than what we projected, not only would we have borrowed money at a very attractive rate, meaning less than 4%, significantly less than 4%. In addition to that, we would have made a fee, which in 2015 dollars would be $1 million. So we would have borrowed money at less than 4%, and we would have made $1 million fee, which is slightly more than what we were expecting to do. So net, we're very happy with the deal. We're happy we did it, but the game is not over. There are tort liabilities that are coming down the pike every second day. So I'm cautiously optimistic that the deal will work out better than what we expected it to work out.
Well, the really interesting thing is that within Berkshire, the casualty insurance companies have 4 times as much stockholder capital behind each dollar of premium volume. 4 times normal. And of course we see the big deals. Who would you trust if you had a big liability you wanted to dump on somebody?
And we have 25 billion or more coming in from things other than insurance, uncorrelated to insurance, every year with no obligations. We don't pay dividends. If you pay dividends and you cut your dividend, try going around trying to write insurance the next day. I mean, it's a business where the people are counting on you to pay. And when we take that $10 billion, we don't agree to put it in 5-year bonds and 10-year bonds. We don't even think that way. And the people that do business with us know that they have somebody like nobody else that's going to be able to pay $10 billion, no matter what happens to the economy. So it's not only the presence of enormous strength in the insurance companies, it's the fact we got all these earnings that essentially come in every month, and we don't have a lot of debt. I mean, we have debt at the railroad and the energy level, but in terms of the rest of the operation, and we don't guarantee that debt, but it's plenty good. And there just isn't another Berkshire. And Ajit recognizes that when he's negotiating. So does the other party if the sums are big enough. There's all kinds of people that love to get 500 million or 300 million, and they may think in terms of lending it out because that's what their insurance companies can do at a somewhat higher rate. But that is not a game we play in, and we don't have any interest in playing in it. Okay, station 4.
Hello, I'm Marvin Blum, an estate planning lawyer from Fort Worth, Texas, home to many of your companies. In fact, Warren, I met you at the memorial for our beloved Paul Andrews, who was manager of TTI. I'd like to get your thoughts on a widespread problem in the world of estate planning, and that's the failure of most parents to prepare the next generation for the inheritance coming their way. In particular, if the estate includes a family business, most parents fail to do business succession planning to plan for who'll run the business on the day when, not if, the founder is no longer there to run it. The kids aren't prepared, unlike King Charles, the other King Charles, not King Charlie Munger, who has been preparing for his job as King of England now for more than 70 years. I sometimes describe the situation like this. Picture a football game. At one end of the field is a quarterback. He has great skills. He throws a beautiful pass to the other end of the field. And at the other end of the field are the receivers. They've never been to a practice. They don't know the rules of the game. They don't know how to work together as a team. They're clueless. So the quarterback is the patriarch and the matriarch. The football is the inheritance or the family business, and the receivers are the kids. So what are the odds that they're going to catch the football and go score a touchdown? Yeah. Probably only around 10%.
I've got the picture just give me. Now, I probably observed as many, just because of my age and to some extent because of things like the giving pledges. I probably observed as many, particularly wealthy families, the problems, and they all get very particular to the family. And in my family, I do not sign a will until my 3 children have read it, understand it, and made suggestions. Now, my children are in their 60s, and that would not have been a great success if I'd done the same thing at their 20s. It depends on the family. It depends on how the kids feel about each other. There's all kinds of things. Depends on the kind of business you have. So there's 1,000 variables. But I do think that if the children are grown, and when the will is read to them, it's the first they've heard about what the deceased thought about things, the parents have made a terrible mistake. And people, well, I've run into all kinds of situations, and some people don't tell their children anything, and some of them try and get them to bend to their will by using their own personal will. They make a million mistakes, and that's when you don't get to correct. Now, certainly in Charlie's had a lot of experience too with the
Well, at Berkshire, we have a simple problem of estate planning. Just hold the goddamn stock.
Well, but that doesn't fit everybody, Charlie. I mean, No,
it only fits 95%.
I don't think it necessarily. I don't know necessarily whether if you have billions of dollars, you want to leave it to all your children. I mean, that's something.
Well, that's another question. But if you're going to place it somewhere, I just as soon as Berkshire stock is.
Yeah. Oh, you're solving the investment problem for them, but you've got the personal problem of the fact that when they were 4, one of the kids pulled the other kid's cat's tail or something like that. I mean, you're dealing with human beings, and the biggest thing you want is you want your children to get along. I mean, you want that all through your life.
Yeah.
And the estate isn't the only place where you can mess that up, but it's a place where it's a very easy. I mean, I know a number of cases where the people did not know what was in the will, where there were huge sums involved, and within about 15 minutes, each one of them had a lawyer, and they don't get along since. I mean, it's important to handle it right, and it's important if you want your kids to have a certain values. It's important that you live those values. It's important that you talk about it to them, or they're learning from you from the day they're born what you're really like. And don't think that a cleverly drawn will substitute for your own behavior in teaching your kids the values you hope that they will have. And then your will should be in conjunction with that. It should start expressing it, and they grow older, and then they learn to pass along their values in connection with the size of the state. If there's family farms, it's one thing. If it's a bunch of marketable securities, it's something else. But I know one instance by a particularly rich fellow that once a year he'd get his kids together and have a dinner and do all kinds of things to get them to sign their income tax returns in blank, because he didn't want them to know how much money they had and everything. Well, if that isn't going to work, I mean, I don't know what necessarily would have worked with him, but if you want, but Charlie and I have said it, if you want to figure out how you want to live your life, you write your obituary and reverse engineer it. I mean, and Paul Andrews, incidentally, who you mentioned, at TTI, lived as great a life as anybody I've known. And he thought about these problems, and he came to me. He was 61, I think, had all the money way beyond what he needed. He didn't care about it. He'd like to give it to people. He had all kinds of good things he wanted to do. And he said, for a year, I've been worried about my business, TTI. And he said, I've got all the money I need. The family's got all the money that I need. But what do I do with the business? These people have helped me throughout my life. And he says, I could sell it to a competitor. If I sold it to a competitor, they'd fire my people and keep their people when they put it together. And if I sell it to a private equity firm or something, they'll be figuring their exit strategy as they sign the papers. And he said, so I've been thinking about it a year. And he said, it isn't that you're such a great guy. He says, it's just you're the only one left. And we bought it, and we lived happily ever after. And that was a man that knew what life was about. So with that, let's go on to Becky.
This question comes from Don Glickstein in Seattle. He says, Warren has criticized Norfolk Southern's handling of its train derailment, yet has been silent about BNSF's conduct. A federal judge ruled in March that BNSF intentionally and illegally violated an easement agreement on tribal land in Washington state by transporting long trains of crude oil. The same month the judge made his ruling, a BNSF train derailed on tribal land, spilling oil in an environmentally sensitive area. What is Warren doing to ensure that BNSF and other Berkshire subsidiaries fulfill their ethical responsibilities? He says he's been a Berkshire owner for more than 2 decades, and he's concerned that Berkshire has no systems to identify and address what he calls reprehensible behavior at BNSF and other subsidiaries.
Greg?
Sure. So it is a valid issue that our team obviously has been dealing with at BNSF. We did move crude across that tribal land. We had an agreement that allowed us to move X number of units per day, and we did breach it. We went over it. there was some fundamental breakdowns there in that our team didn't understand the number of trains that they could move. We have had significant discussions with the tribe looking to resolve the issue, recognizing we obviously benefited from moving those trains, and those type of discussions will continue. I would say there's lessons learned there that we have to, when we make a commitment, understand what that commitment is and live by it, or don't assume we can just move our trains as we wish or the cargo as we wish. We have to respect those agreements. So there's been a moment learned there, but at the same time, we've taken it very seriously and attempted to reach a resolution there. And at some point, I hope we do come to a true resolution that's fair both to the tribe and to BNSF. On the derailment side, we did have an issue around the track derailed. We worked very closely with the tribe to mitigate that issue instantly, or at least over a very reasonable period of time. They were very responsive. Our team was very responsive, and there were really no long-term environmental impacts to that spill. And as our teams highlighted in other comments, obviously derailments do occur in the industry. We take them incredibly serious. They're not all hazardous, but irrespective of that, we're constantly looking at how do we prevent them? How do we detect them when we potentially have one that's going to occur? And what do we do with our trains? And then ultimately it comes down to responding properly, because they will occur. And I think we have an incredibly dedicated team that's always ready to respond to the communities they're impacting.
There are derailments. How many a year?
Yeah, well, there's 1,000 plus in the industry.
Yeah. It's you start hauling freight, and we're a common carrier. We take very heavy freight, and we take them at 100 degrees when it's weather, and we take it at 0, and we go around curves, and we have grades, and even a 1% grade if you're going down a hill with I don't know how much weight behind you. I mean, there are a lot of railroading is not an easy business, and of course the systems were designed, basically in the late 1800s, the mid to late 1800s, and we have 22,000, I think it is, miles of track, and that doesn't count sidings and some other things. It is not an easy business. We'll make mistakes. Our job, we're not making a mistake because we have a derailment. We will have derailments 10 and 20 years or 30 years from now. I mean but we have to carry certain products we wish we didn't have to carry. We're a common carrier. Do we like carrying chlorine and ammonia and all of it? No, but they're going to move from one place to another in this society, and we are a common carrier, and we load them, and if they select our railroad. But we are better than we used to be, but we've got a long way to go, I think. Is that a fair enough statement?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, station 5.
Hi, Mr. Warren and Mr. Munger. My name is Su Jinghua from China, Zhuning Longdao Company. And first of all, I'm so excited and very honored to be here today. And my question is, with more and more people focusing on environmental protection and the government supporting the new energy industry as well, so what are your thoughts on the continued development of new energy? How may the new energy firm achieve better development in future?
Yeah, well, Greg, I think is the best to answer that, because since we bought a company called Mid-American, but now called Berkshire Hathaway Energy, but he's been talking about it yearly, preparing reports, hoping that we can help solve a number of the problems, and we probably spent more money than any utility, I would guess, in the United States.
Absolutely. Yep.
And we've just scratched the surface. But it is not easy when you cross state lines. I mean, you've got different jurisdictions, and this country should be ahead of where it is in terms of transmission, and we have been the biggest factor in helping that. But why don't you tell them a little bit about it?
Sure. Thanks, Warren. So there's no question there's an energy transformation going on around the globe, and as Warren touched on, in the U.S., and in some ways I would hope here in the U.S. it would be, we'd at least have a clear plan across the nation as to how to approach that, but the reality is it is state by state, with some exceptions. But so as a result, when you think of Berkshire Hathaway Energy, we own 3 U.S. utilities there, and they'll participate in multiple states, but they're developing plans state by state and then trying to integrate them across the various states. The opportunities are significant because there is a transformation going on. We've outlined our goal on where we're going relative to carbon at BHE, where they'll, by 2030, reduce their carbon footprint by 50% relative to 2005. So that's the Paris Accord and the standard they want to hold the utility industry or the utility companies to. And we're well on that path, but to achieve it is a true journey. I've often talked to Warren. When we bought Pacific Corp back in the mid-2000s, we immediately recognized to build a lot of renewable energy like we'd been doing in the Midwest and Iowa, but that was basically in a single state. Now Pacific Corp, we're in 6 states. We started that back in the mid-2000s. Here we are, and we laid out a great transmission plan. Here's how we're going to build it. Here's how we're going to effectuate it, and all the benefits for our customers over that period of time. Here we are in 2023, and we have a little more than a third of that. At the time, it was a $6 billion transmission project. Today, we have a little more than a third of it built, and we've spent probably closer to $7 billion. And it's the right outcome. It's still a great outcome for our customers, but that transmission, you absolutely, as part of the transformation, you absolutely have to build it to move all that renewable energy. And that's sort of the complexity Warren was highlighting. It is you can't just wake up one day and solve this problem. You start with transmission and then you build the resources. But at that same company, and if we look at what we're doing across BHE Energy and that energy transformation, we have $70 billion of known projects that are really required to properly serve our customers and achieve that type of energy transformation across those utilities, and that's in the coming 10 years. So we have a team that's absolutely up to the challenge. They're delivering on their commitments, and it's a very good business opportunity for each of our companies and for our shareholders, because as we deploy that capital, we obviously earn a return on equity of it. So, but it will be a long journey. It'll happen over an extended period of time. And the further you get out there, the more dependent upon the evolution of a variety of technologies that are progressing but not there yet. So
you've raised a question that I want to just take an extra minute on because it's so important, and I don't really know whether our form of government is ideal at all in terms of solving the problem you describe. We have solved it one time. In World War II, we took a country that was semi-limping along, and we found ourselves in a world war. And what we did in a world war is we brought a bunch of people to Washington at $1 a year, whether it was Sidney Weinberg or Goldman Sachs, you just name them. And we gave them enormous power to reorient the resources of the United States to face the problem that they faced, which was to create a war machine. And what they did was they found Henry Kaiser, and told him to build ships. And they went to the Ford Motor Company and said, you build tanks and some airplanes. And they reordered the industrial enterprise of the United States in a way that was unbelievable, because they had the power of the federal government and they had the ingenuity of American business and they had the facilities of American business. And it led to a very successful outcome. But can we do that in a peacetime where you've got 50 states and you have to get them to cooperate, and you don't have anyone that you can issue orders, but you can't designate where the capital goes at the other end? And we try and do it with tax incentives and all of that sort of thing, but we haven't created the unity of purpose and the machinery that worked in World War II, where essentially everybody felt that their one job was to win the war, and we figured out how to use our industrial capacity to, in effect, defeat the Axis powers. And how do you recreate that with the present democratic system? I'm not sure I know the answer, but I sure know the problem. And I think that if you can think of if you've got an emergency on your hand, I mean, you really need to re-engineer the energy system of the United States. I don't think you can do it without something resembling the machinery, the urgency, whatever. The capital is there. Yeah. The people are there. The objective is obvious, and we just don't seem to be able to do it in a peacetime where we're used to following a given set of procedure, and China, you've got one country, and we've got 50 states, and we got a whole different system of government. That we should be up to the test, but so far it hasn't worked. So thank you for the question. Becky?